Most people spend their entire lives believing a dangerous lie. They believe money follows effort. Work harder, stay later, take fewer breaks, sacrifice more, and eventually, wealth will arrive. But if effort alone created wealth, the hardest working people on earth would be the richest. Construction workers would be millionaires. Factory workers would own private jets. People working 2 jobs would be financially free. Yet that's not what we see. The uncomfortable truth is that money has never rewarded effort alone. Money rewards leverage. And leverage is the force that separates the wealthy from everyone else. Look closely at the people who build extraordinary wealth. They don't simply work harder than everyone else. They build systems. They own assets. They create businesses. They invest in technologies. They develop audiences. They position themselves so that 1 hour of effort can create results long after that hour is gone. The average person sells time. The wealthy multiply time. That's the difference. Think about a teacher standing in a classroom. They can influence 30 people at once. Now think about someone who creates an online course. That same lesson can reach 30,000 people. The effort may be similar, but the leverage is completely different. The modern economy rewards leverage more than labor. A single piece of content can generate income for years. A business can make sales while the owner sleeps. An investment can grow without daily attention. An audience can create opportunities that money alone cannot buy. This is why 2 people with the same intelligence and work ethic can end up living completely different lives. One spends decades trading hours for dollars. The other spends years building assets that continue producing value. One stays busy, the other becomes free. Behavioral economists call this a common wealth illusion. Most people focus on increasing effort. The wealthy focus on increasing leverage, because effort has limits. There are only 24 hours in a day. But leverage has no such limit. Technology can work for millions. Capital can work around the clock. Media can reach the entire world. And ownership can continue paying long after the work is finished. This is where most people get trapped. They ask, how can I make more money? But the better question is, how can I make my effort worth more? That single shift in thinking changes everything. Because wealth is not created when you work harder. Wealth is created when your work continues producing value without requiring your constant presence. The richest people are rarely the ones who put in the most hours. They are the ones who build the most leverage. And in a world where everyone is competing with effort, leverage becomes a superpower. So before you ask how to earn more next month, ask yourself something deeper. What am I building today that can create value tomorrow? Because the future belongs to those who stop selling every hour and start owning the systems that make hours irrelevant. Most people will spend the next 10 years working harder. A small percentage will spend the next 10 years building leverage. And by the end of that decade, the gap between those 2 groups will look like luck. But it won't be luck. It will be leverage. Most people think financial security comes from having a steady paycheck. But what if that paycheck is actually the thing keeping you trapped? Think about it. The average person spends decades chasing stability. A stable job, a stable income, a stable routine. And while those things may feel safe, they often create something far more dangerous: dependence. Dependence is the invisible prison most people never see. The moment your survival depends on one employer, one paycheck, one client, or one source of income, you lose leverage. And the moment you lose leverage, you lose power. This is why 2 people can earn the exact same amount of money and live completely different lives. One has options. The other has obligations. One can walk away, the other cannot. And in every negotiation, the person who can walk away holds the advantage. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He warned that dependence is weakness, because weakness eventually becomes control in someone else's hands. Look around the modern world. Millions of people wake up every morning feeling stressed, not because they're lazy, not because they're incapable, but because they know one missed paycheck could create a crisis. That is not security. That is dependency disguised as security. The wealthy think differently. They do not ask, how can I earn more money? They ask, how can I reduce the number of people who control my future? That question changes everything. Because true wealth is not measured by income, it's measured by independence. Behavioral economists call this the concentration risk trap. When too much of your financial life depends on a single source, your vulnerability increases dramatically. A company can downsize. An industry can change. A client can leave. A government policy can shift. And suddenly, years of stability disappear overnight. The people who survive these shocks are rarely the strongest. They are the most adaptable. They build multiple streams of income. They develop skills that remain valuable in any economy. They create assets. They invest in ownership. And most importantly, they refuse to place their future into someone else's hands. This is where most people get confused. They think freedom comes after wealth. But in reality, wealth often begins with the pursuit of freedom. The moment you start reducing dependence, you start increasing leverage. The moment you increase leverage, opportunities begin to appear. And the moment opportunities appear, your financial life starts operating under a completely different set of rules. The sad reality is that many people spend their entire lives seeking comfort instead of control. They optimize for convenience. They optimize for certainty. They optimize for short-term peace. But every convenience comes with a hidden cost. Every dependency comes with a hidden price. And eventually, someone always pays it. The people who build real wealth understand a simple truth. Never allow a single source to determine your destiny. Because when one person controls your income, they influence your decisions. When one company controls your livelihood, they influence your freedom. And when one system controls your future, you are no longer in control of your own life. The goal is not merely to make more money. The goal is to build a life where no single event can destroy you. Because financial freedom is not about becoming rich, it's about becoming difficult to control. And the people who become difficult to control are often the people who become wealthy, not by accident, but by design. Most people spend years building dependence. A small percentage spend years building options. And in the long run, options become power. Power becomes freedom, and freedom becomes wealth. Most people believe they make rational decisions. They believe they carefully analyze information, weigh the facts, and choose what's best for them. But if that were true, companies wouldn't spend billions of dollars studying human psychology. The uncomfortable truth is that human behavior is far more predictable than most people think. And the people who understand that reality often end up controlling the flow of money. Think about it. Why do people buy things they don't need? Why do they panic during market crashes? Why do they follow trends long after the opportunity has passed? Why do they spend years trying to impress people they barely know? The answer is simple. Human beings are emotional creatures pretending to be logical ones. We like to believe we're independent thinkers. But much of our behavior is driven by invisible psychological forces. Fear, status, social approval, scarcity, comfort, and belonging. The world's most successful companies understand this better than most consumers ever will. They don't sell products, they sell emotions. Luxury brands don't sell watches, they sell status. Fitness companies don't sell workouts, they sell transformation. Social media platforms don't sell entertainment, they sell attention. And attention eventually becomes influence. Influence becomes behavior, and behavior becomes money. Behavioral psychologists have discovered something fascinating. People rarely buy based on logic alone. Instead, they create emotional reasons first, and logical explanations afterward. In other words, most decisions are made emotionally and justified rationally. That's why someone will spend thousands of dollars on a luxury item while convincing themselves it was a practical purchase. That's why investors buy at market peaks when everyone feels optimistic and sell during crashes when everyone feels afraid. The crowd doesn't move based on facts. The crowd moves based on emotions, and emotions are surprisingly predictable. This is where the wealthy think differently. They spend less time asking, "What do people say they want?" and more time asking, "What are people emotionally driven to do?" Because what people say and what people do are often two completely different things. The greatest fortunes in history were built by understanding this gap. Businesses succeed when they solve predictable human desires. Marketers succeed when they understand predictable human fears. Investors succeed when they recognize predictable human mistakes. And leaders succeed when they understand predictable human motivations. The average person becomes a participant in these psychological systems. The strategist learns how they work, and once you begin noticing these patterns, you see them everywhere. You notice how urgency drives purchases, how social proof drives trends, how fear drives bad decisions, how status drives spending, and how entire industries profit from predictable human behavior. The real advantage isn't manipulating people, it's understanding yourself. Because the moment you recognize the forces influencing your decisions, you become harder to control, harder to sell to, harder to pressure, harder to manipulate. And that is where financial power begins. Most people spend their lives reacting to emotions they don't understand. A small percentage learn to observe those emotions before acting. And over time, that difference becomes enormous. One group follows the crowd. The other profits from it. Because in the end, money doesn't flow toward the people who understand numbers the best. It often flows toward the people who understand human nature the best. And human nature has always been far more predictable than most people are willing to admit. Most people believe wealth is a numbers game. Earn more, save more, invest more, and eventually you'll become financially successful. But what if the real battle has nothing to do with money? What if the greatest obstacle between you and wealth is not your income, but your emotions? Look closely at the biggest financial mistakes people make. Panic selling during a market crash. Impulse, buying things they don't need. Taking on debt to impress people they don't even like. Quitting investments too early. Chasing trends too late. These aren't intelligence problems. They're emotional problems. And emotions are expensive. In fact, some of the smartest people in the world remain financially average because they never learn to control their emotional reactions. Behavioral economists have studied this for decades. They discovered something fascinating. People don't usually lose money because they lack information. They lose money because fear, greed, impatience, and anxiety take control at the worst possible moments. Think about investing. When prices are rising and everyone feels optimistic, people rush in. When prices collapse and fear dominates the headlines, people rush out. They buy high, they sell low. Not because they're irrational all the time, but because emotions temporarily override logic. The market rewards discipline. Yet most people bring emotion into every decision they make. The wealthy understand something different. They know that money is not merely a financial tool, it's an emotional test. Every major financial opportunity comes disguised as uncertainty. Every market correction creates fear. Every business venture creates doubt. Every investment requires patience. And patience becomes impossible when emotions are in control. This is why emotional regulation is one of the most valuable wealth-building skills in existence. Not because it makes you feel better, but because it helps you make better decisions when others are losing control. Consider two people facing the exact same opportunity. One reacts emotionally, the other responds strategically. One focuses on immediate comfort. The other focuses on long-term outcomes. One seeks certainty. The other accepts uncertainty as the price of growth. 5 years later, their lives often look completely different. Not because one was smarter, because one was calmer. Machiavelli understood this principle centuries ago. He observed that people reveal their weaknesses under pressure, and nowhere is this more visible than with money. When fear appears, most people rush. When uncertainty appears, most people retreat. When losses appear, most people panic. But the person who remains composed gains an enormous advantage, because while everyone else is reacting, they're observing. While everyone else is escaping discomfort, they're evaluating opportunities. And while everyone else is focused on today's emotions, they're focused on tomorrow's results. The truth is, wealth rarely belongs to the most emotional person in the room. It belongs to the person who can think clearly when emotions are running high. Because every financial decision is really two decisions: the decision itself and the emotional state behind it. Most people spend years learning how money works. Very few spend time learning how their own minds work. And that is why so many intelligent people stay financially stuck. They master information, but never master themselves. In the end, financial success is not just about earning more money. It's about becoming the type of person who can make rational decisions when everyone else is driven by fear, greed, urgency, or panic. Because the moment emotions stop controlling your decisions start building wealth. And that is where true financial power begins. Most people spend their entire lives chasing comfort. A comfortable job, a comfortable routine, a comfortable paycheck, a comfortable future. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. After all, who doesn't want security? Who doesn't want stability? Who doesn't want peace of mind? But what if the very thing you're chasing is the thing holding you back? What if comfort is not the reward, but the trap? Look closely at the lives of people who build extraordinary wealth. Their journey rarely begins with comfort. It begins with uncertainty, with risk, with sacrifice, with decisions that most people are too afraid to make, because growth and comfort have never been close friends. One requires expansion, the other encourages stagnation. The uncomfortable truth is that comfort feels safe because it protects you from immediate pain, but it often protects you from opportunity as well. Every major breakthrough in life lives outside your comfort zone. The promotion you want, the business you dream about, the investment opportunity that could change your future, the skill that could multiply your income. They all require one thing: temporary discomfort. Behavioral psychologists call this the comfort zone bias. Human beings naturally prefer familiar situations, even when those situations are limiting their potential. In fact, studies have shown that many people will tolerate years of frustration simply because the familiar feels safer than the unknown. Think about that. People often stay in jobs they dislike, relationships that no longer serve them, financial habits that keep them stuck, not because they enjoy them, but because they're familiar. And familiarity creates the illusion of safety. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He observed that people often fear change more than failure itself. Why? Because change threatens certainty, and certainty is addictive. The problem is that wealth is rarely created through certainty. It's created through calculated uncertainty. Every entrepreneur faces uncertainty. Every investor faces uncertainty. Every leader faces uncertainty. The difference is that successful people learn to become comfortable being uncomfortable. While most people run from discomfort, they learn from it. While most people avoid uncertainty, they prepare for it. While most people seek guarantees, they seek opportunities. This is where the financial divide begins. The average person asks, "How can I avoid risk?" The wealthy ask, "Which risks are worth taking?" Because avoiding all risk does not eliminate danger. It simply guarantees a different kind of danger. The danger of stagnation. The danger of dependence. The danger of looking back 10 years from now wondering what could have been. The reality is that every choice carries a price. Choosing growth has a price. But choosing comfort has a price too. The difference is that the price of growth is paid today. The price of comfort is paid in the future. And future costs are often far more expensive. Look around at the people who seem stuck. Many of them are not lacking intelligence. They're not lacking opportunity. They're lacking the willingness to leave what feels safe. Because comfort whispers a seductive lie. It says, "Stay where you are. Wait a little longer. Now isn't the right time." And while you're listening, opportunities quietly pass by. Meanwhile, the people willing to endure discomfort are building businesses, learning new skills, creating assets, taking calculated risks, and slowly increasing their freedom. Because wealth is not built by those who seek comfort. It's built by those who can tolerate discomfort long enough to create something greater. In the end, comfort is not always the reward for success. Sometimes it's the reason success never arrives. And the life you want may be hiding behind the very discomfort you've been trying to avoid. Most people grow up believing that hard work is the ultimate path to success. Work harder than everyone else. Arrive earlier. Stay later. Take on more responsibilities. And eventually, the rewards will come. It's a comforting idea. It sounds fair. It sounds logical. But if hard work alone created extraordinary wealth, millions of hard-working people would already be financially free. Yet that's not the world we live in, because there is something far more powerful than hard work: positioning. The truth is, the marketplace does not reward effort equally. It rewards visibility, it rewards influence, it rewards leverage, and most importantly, it rewards position. Imagine two people with identical talent. The first spends years working in obscurity. The second places that same talent in front of the right audience, at the right time, in the right environment. Who succeeds faster? Who earns more? Who creates more opportunities? The answer is obvious. Talent matters, effort matters, but position multiplies both. This is why some businesses explode while others quietly disappear. Not because one product is dramatically better, but because one product is positioned better. The modern world is filled with examples. A brilliant entrepreneur can remain unknown. A less talented competitor with better positioning can dominate an entire market. An exceptional employee can spend years waiting for recognition. Another employee with strategic visibility can move up rapidly. The difference is not always skill, it's often placement. Machiavelli understood this principle centuries ago. He observed that power rarely belongs to the person doing the most work. It belongs to the person occupying the strongest position. Because position determines influence, and influence determines outcomes. Look at how most people approach their careers. They focus almost entirely on improving performance, working harder, learning more, producing more. While those things matter, they often ignore a more important question. Am I in the right position? Because effort applied in the wrong environment creates frustration. The right position can achieve more in a year than endless effort can achieve in a decade. This is one of the hidden truths of wealth. The wealthy are not always the hardest workers. They are often the best positioned. They place themselves near opportunity, near decision makers, near growing industries, near valuable networks, near assets that appreciate. And over time, those positions compound. Behavioral economists call this an asymmetric advantage. Small differences in positioning create massive differences in outcomes. Think about investing. Buying the right asset at the right moment can outperform years of additional labor. Think about business. Meeting the right partner can accelerate growth faster than working twice as hard. Think about content creation. One strategic piece of content can reach millions. Years of effort without visibility may reach almost no one. This is why positioning is so powerful. It changes the game before the game even begins. Most people are obsessed with becoming better. Few people ask where they should stand, but where you stand often determines what becomes possible. The worker focuses on output. The strategist focuses on placement. The worker asks, "What should I do next?" The strategist asks, "Where should I be?" That single question can transform an entire future, because life is not only about effort, it's about direction. And moving quickly in the wrong direction only takes you further away from where you want to go. The people who build extraordinary wealth understand this deeply. They do not spend their lives chasing every opportunity. They spend their lives positioning themselves where opportunities naturally flow. And once you understand that principle, everything changes. You stop asking how to work harder and start asking how to become impossible to ignore. Because in the modern economy, effort gets you noticed, but positioning gets you rewarded, and the rewards often go to the person who chose the right place long before anyone else realized its value. Most people are afraid of silence. The moment a conversation becomes quiet, they rush to fill the space. They explain more, talk more, reveal more, and without realizing it, they give away their power. But the most influential people in the room often do the exact opposite. They stay silent, and that silence changes everything. Think about it. Why does silence make people uncomfortable? Because silence creates uncertainty, and human beings naturally want certainty. When no response comes, the mind begins searching for answers. People start making assumptions. They start revealing information. They start negotiating against themselves, and that's where power quietly shifts. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He knew that the person who speaks first often reveals their intentions. The person who reacts first often exposes their emotions. And the person who feels compelled to explain themselves usually gives away leverage. In modern life, this principle appears everywhere. In negotiations, in business, in relationships, and especially in money. Imagine you're negotiating a salary. You present your value and then remain silent. What happens? Most people can't tolerate the tension. They begin talking. They reveal their budget, their flexibility, their concerns, their limits. Information starts flowing toward the person who remained silent. The same thing happens in business deals. The same thing happens in investments. The same thing happens in everyday conversations. Because silence is not empty. Silence is pressure, and pressure causes people to reveal themselves. Behavioral psychologists have found that people often disclose more information when confronted with moments of uncertainty. The brain wants relief, and speaking creates relief. But relief for one person often creates advantage for another. This is why emotional control is so closely connected to silence. Most people speak to reduce discomfort. The strategist tolerates discomfort. Most people react immediately. The strategist observes. Most people reveal their position. The strategist gathers information. That difference seems small, but over years it becomes enormous. Look at the people who constantly feel the need to justify every decision, every purchase, every investment, every life choice. They are often seeking approval, and approval creates dependence. The powerful operate differently. They don't need everyone to understand them. They don't need immediate validation. They don't need to explain every move they make. Because confidence rarely shouts. Confidence observes. Confidence waits. Confidence lets results speak. This is one reason wealthy and influential people often appear calm under pressure. It's not because they know everything. It's because they understand something most people never learn. The first person to react often loses control of the situation. When emotions rise, they stay composed. When others rush, they pause. When others fill silence with noise, they gather insight. And that insight becomes leverage. Think about how much information people reveal every day. They reveal fear through urgency. They reveal insecurity through over-explaining. They reveal desperation through constant talking. And most of them don't even realize they're doing it. The person who learns to stay silent sees all of it. Because silence sharpens observation. And observation creates advantage. This doesn't mean becoming cold. It doesn't mean becoming manipulative. It means becoming deliberate. Speaking only when your words create value. Listening more than you talk, and understanding that not every silence needs to be filled. In a world where everyone is competing to be heard, silence becomes rare, and rare things become valuable. The deeper truth is that power is often invisible. It doesn't always come from speaking louder. It comes from controlling yourself when everyone else is losing control. Because every unnecessary word gives away information. Every impulsive reaction reveals weakness, and every moment of strategic silence creates an opportunity to see what others miss. The people who dominate negotiations understand this. The people who build influence understand this, and the people who accumulate wealth understand this. Silence is not weakness. Silence is restraint. Silence is patience. Silence is control, and control is where power begins. The next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, defend yourself, or rush to fill an uncomfortable pause. Pause, stay silent, and watch what people reveal. You may discover that the less you say, the more power you have. Most people believe financial success is about making more money. But what if the real challenge isn't earning money? It's keeping control of your decisions. Look around for a moment. Every day, thousands of companies compete for one thing: your attention, your emotions, and ultimately, your money. They study your habits, track your behavior, analyze your fears, and learn exactly what makes you act without thinking. Because the easiest person to profit from is not the poorest person. It's the most predictable person. The uncomfortable truth is that many people spend their entire lives being manipulated without realizing it. Not by force, not by threats, but by psychology. Think about how often you felt the urge to buy something immediately, not because you needed it, but because it was almost sold out, or because everyone else seemed to have it, or because the offer was ending tonight. That isn't coincidence. That's design. Modern marketing is built on understanding human weaknesses, fear of missing out, status anxiety, social proof, instant gratification, the need for approval, the need to belong. These triggers are worth billions of dollars because they work, and they work because most people never learn to recognize them. Machiavelli understood something powerful centuries ago. People are easiest to control when they are emotional. When fear takes over, they become predictable. When greed takes over, they become predictable. When desperation takes over, they become predictable. And predictability creates vulnerability. This is why the wealthy think differently. They don't focus solely on increasing income. They focus on increasing self-control, because every financial decision is a test of patience, a test of discipline, a test of emotional independence. Most people fail these tests without noticing. They chase trends, they follow crowds, they buy to impress, they spend to feel better, and little by little, they surrender control of their future. The wealthy do the opposite. They learn how to pause, how to question urgency, how to recognize manipulation before reacting to it. Behavioral psychologists call this stimulus control, the ability to create space between a trigger and a response. That small space changes everything, because in that space, you regain power. Imagine two people seeing the exact same advertisement. One reacts emotionally, the other analyzes it. One buys immediately, the other waits. One becomes a customer, the other remains in control. Now multiply that difference over 10 years. Thousands of decisions, thousands of opportunities to either be manipulated or remain independent. The gap becomes enormous. This is why becoming wealthy is not just a financial journey. It's a psychological one. The people who achieve lasting wealth are often not the smartest. They're the hardest to influence. They don't panic when markets fall. They don't rush when everyone else is rushing. They don't buy simply because everyone else is buying. And they don't allow temporary emotions to dictate permanent decisions. Because every time you act impulsively, someone else profits from your impatience. Every time you follow the crowd, someone else profits from your conformity. Every time you seek validation through spending, someone else profits from your insecurity. The game is happening whether you notice it or not. The question is, are you playing the game, or are you being played? The deeper truth is that freedom begins the moment you become difficult to manipulate. When advertisers can no longer trigger you, when trends can no longer pressure you, when fear can no longer rush you, when approval can no longer buy you. At that point, something extraordinary happens. You stop making decisions for emotional relief and start making decisions for long-term control. That is where wealth begins. Not in your bank account, not in your investments, but in your mind. Because the people who control themselves become difficult to control. And the people who become difficult to control often become impossible to exploit. That is the hidden foundation of financial power. And in a world designed to manipulate your attention, your emotions, and your money, remaining independent may be the most valuable asset of all. Most people are terrified of losing money. They fear a bad investment, a failed business, a missed opportunity, a wrong decision. And because they fear loss so deeply, they spend their lives avoiding risks that could have changed everything. But what if the real danger isn't losing? What if the real danger is never learning? Think about how society teaches us to view failure. From childhood, we're told that mistakes are bad. Wrong answers are punished. Failure is embarrassing. Losing means you're not good enough. So we grow up believing that every setback is proof of weakness, and that belief quietly follows us into adulthood, into business, into investing, into money, into life. The result? Most people become prisoners of caution. They protect what little they have. They avoid uncertainty. They refuse to take calculated risks. And over time, they mistake safety for progress. Machiavelli understood something most people never do. The people who gain power are not the ones who avoid mistakes. They are the ones who learn from them faster than everyone else. Because every successful person you admire has paid a price. Every entrepreneur, every investor, every leader, every wealthy individual, behind every fortune is a collection of failures most people never see. The failed investments, the rejected ideas, the bad partnerships, the wrong decisions, the painful lessons. The difference is that successful people view those experiences differently. They don't see them as proof that they should stop. They see them as tuition. Tuition for knowledge, tuition for experience, tuition for understanding how the real world works. Think about college for a moment. People willingly spend tens of thousands of dollars on an education because they believe the knowledge is valuable. Yet when life teaches them a lesson through failure, they call it a disaster. Why? Because one comes with a diploma, the other comes with discomfort. But often, the lessons that create wealth are learned outside the classroom. Behavioral psychologists call this loss aversion. Studies consistently show that people feel the pain of losing more intensely than the pleasure of winning. In fact, the fear of losing often becomes stronger than the desire to grow, and that's where opportunities disappear. People stay in jobs they hate, avoid investments they don't fully understand, refuse to start businesses they've dreamed about for years, not because success is impossible, but because failure feels unacceptable. The wealthy operate under a different framework. They understand that losses are not always signs of poor judgment. Sometimes they are the price of acquiring information. Imagine two people starting a business. The first experiences a setback and immediately quits. The second experiences the same setback but studies what went wrong. One loses twice. First the money, then the lesson. The other loses once and gains experience that compounds for years. That's why some failures become future fortunes, because the lesson survives long after the loss disappears. This is one of the most misunderstood truths about wealth. Success is rarely a straight line. It's a series of corrections, a series of adjustments, a series of lessons purchased through mistakes. The market rewards people who adapt, not people who never fail. And yet most people spend their lives trying to avoid looking foolish. They protect their ego, protect their reputation, protect their comfort, while those willing to learn keep moving forward. Machiavelli observed that fortune favors those who act, while others hesitate, not because they are fearless, but because they understand something important. Waiting for certainty is often the most expensive decision of all. Every year spent avoiding mistakes is also a year spent avoiding growth. Every opportunity carries risk. Every reward carries uncertainty. Every breakthrough requires stepping into territory where failure is possible. The goal is not to eliminate losses. The goal is to make sure every loss teaches you something valuable, because a loss without a lesson is failure. But a loss with a lesson is an investment, and over time, those lessons compound into wisdom. Wisdom creates better decisions. Better decisions create leverage, and leverage creates wealth. The people who remain stuck often spend years asking, "How do I avoid losing?" The people who succeed ask a different question. "What can this loss teach me?" That question changes everything, because in the long run, wealth is not built by people who never fall. It's built by people who learn how to rise stronger every time they do. And once you understand that, loss stops looking like the end of the story. It becomes part of the price of writing a better one. Most people wake up every day believing they're making progress. They're busy. They're productive. They're constantly moving, answering emails, attending meetings, working overtime, chasing opportunities, checking notifications, crossing tasks off endless to-do lists. And at the end of the day, they feel accomplished because they were active. But activity and progress are not the same thing. In fact, one of the most dangerous illusions in modern life is confusing movement with advancement, because you can spend years running and still be standing in the wrong place. The uncomfortable truth is that wealth is not primarily created through activity. It's created through position. Look closely at the world's wealthiest people. Many of them are not working every minute of every day. Many are not grinding harder than everyone else. What they possess is something far more valuable. Position. Position in growing industries. Position near valuable networks. Position inside systems that generate leverage. Position around assets that appreciate over time. Machiavelli understood this principle centuries ago. He observed that power rarely belongs to the person moving the most. It belongs to the person occupying the strongest position, because position determines influence, position determines opportunity, and ultimately, position determines outcomes. Think about a surfer. The hardest working surfer in the world cannot create a wave, but the surfer who positions themselves correctly can ride one effortlessly. Money works the same way. Many people exhaust themselves trying to force outcomes. The wealthy focus on placing themselves where opportunities naturally occur. This is why two people can work equally hard and experience completely different results. One spends years climbing a ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall. The other chooses the right wall before they begin climbing. The effort may be similar, the outcome is not. Behavioral economists call this an asymmetry of position. Small differences in location, timing, and leverage can produce massive differences in results. Consider technology. Thousands of talented people worked hard in declining industries. Others positioned themselves inside growing industries and achieved far greater rewards with similar effort. Consider investing. Some people spend decades saving aggressively. Others place capital into appreciating assets and allow position to do much of the work. Consider business. The right market often matters more than the perfect product. The right audience often matters more than the perfect message. The right position often matters more than relentless activity. Yet most people never think this way. They're taught that success belongs to whoever works the hardest. So they focus on doing more hours, more tasks, more hustle, more movement. But they rarely stop to ask the most important question. Am I positioned correctly? Because movement without leverage is noise, and noise creates the illusion of progress. The strategist understands something different. They know that one well-positioned move can outperform years of unfocused effort. This is why wealthy people often appear calmer than everyone else. They're not necessarily doing less. They're doing what matters from the right position. Instead of constantly asking, "What should I do next?" they ask, "Where should I stand?" That question changes everything. Because standing in the right position often creates opportunities that hard work alone can never produce. The right network introduces the right partnership. The right investment compounds for years. The right business model scales without requiring more time. The right audience creates endless opportunities. And none of those advantages come from activity alone. They come from position. This is the hidden game most people never see. The world rewards leverage more than labor, ownership more than effort, position more than motion. The tragedy is that many people spend decades becoming incredibly efficient at things that don't move them forward. They become masters of activity while remaining beginners at strategy. But wealth has never been about staying busy. It's about being strategically placed. Because in the end, the goal is not to move faster than everyone else. The goal is to stand where the future is already moving. And when you do, progress stops feeling like a struggle. It starts feeling inevitable. The people who win the wealth game are not always the busiest. They are the ones who positioned themselves correctly long before everyone else realized where the game was heading. And by the time the crowd notices, the advantage is already theirs.